short list of Africans who have significantly impacted the United Nations, today I'm featuring an Egyptian giant way before Mohammed Salah, but largely unknown to the African public, despite having influenced the creation and transformation of several UN agencies such as UNECA, IFAD, UNTAD, all of which still exist today. The creation of these agencies symbolizes a silent revolution that changed the very philosophy of the United Nations systems today. To find out more about him, the Sankofa takes you today inside the head of one of the most intelligent men the earth has seen, a prominent African economist whose work on capitalism, colonialism, and underdevelopment should haunt us all, especially in all the temples of today's wild capitalism. Hello and please salute Professor Samir Amin.
African History Daily by my daddy.
Imagine the world economy as a football pitch, with each goalpost on the pitch representing one of the two worlds. The first goalpost representing the poor and the other goalpost representing the rich. In said pitch, just like in football, each of the two goalposts would obviously never touch each other. The only interactions are the movement of the ball, and they are represented here by the movement of capital, natural resources, and cheap labor between the rich and the poor. And finally, there is a referee who is, just like in football, not always impartial. This is an example that can be used to illustrate the economic school of thought called the theory of modernization, which claim that poor countries are at a lower stage of their development and that they are not integrated in the global economy, which is why they owe their development to the rich countries. I'm not sure what you think about this, but believe it or not, during the first decades of its inception, this was the dominant philosophy within the UN system, which was exclusively focused on preserving peace and security in the world. However, that quickly became idealistic and unrealistic. It's in order to highlight this jointness between the world's needs and the practice within the UN that a group of South American thinkers such as Marini and Bambira developed between the late 1960s and the early 1970s an alternative economic theory called the theory of dependency. The representation of the global economy changed then from a football pitch to a rugby scrum, highlighting how rich countries were in the middle of a scrum closer to the ball and poorer countries were cast to the periphery of the scrum. Dependency theory was essentially developed to highlight two things. Number one, that the poorest countries were obliged to provide natural resources and cheap labor to richer countries. And number two, that the legal, financial, and technical constraints implemented by richer countries made the poorer countries even more dependent on them. While Professor Samir Amin was not among the initial group of thinkers who came up with the dependency theory, his later contributions did more than supplementing its impact. First, in his doctoral thesis published in 1963, entitled The Origins of Underdevelopment, Capitalistic Accumulation on a World Scale, he unveiled a new approach highlighting the relationship between the so-called first and third worlds. Then in 1985, at the same time when the IMF, the World Bank, and the Treasury of the United States were approving the Washington Consensus, a sort of 10 commandment book for practitioners of the new liberal policies applied in third world countries, Amin expanded on the theory of dependency by coming up with the theory of disconnection, which advocated that the poorest and peripheral countries must control the process of internal accumulation, which will free them from the economic, social, and cultural interests of the richer countries and result in orienting them toward a more autonomous development.
Don't you know, talking about a revolution.
Amin's theory disrupted the UN status quo and forced organization-wide self-criticism, which finally deconstructed the ruling order, resulting in the birth of newer, smaller UN agencies that sought to specifically tackle issues of inequality, poverty, and development. The UN created agencies like UNTAD, UN Conference on Trade and Development, in charge of world trade issues. And then the IFAD Fund, a fund created to coexist with the FAO to focus on small agricultural firms. It is also thanks to Professor Amin's disruptive theory that within UNESCO, under the leadership of Amadou Matambo, as seen in the last episode, the discussion on the new order of information and communication was launched. Amin then carried the revolution himself by taking over the leadership of the African Institute for Economic Development and Planning in Dakar, Senegal, which he redirected by creating a think tank inside it to critically approach development issues. That think tank is what became today United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. I know I may have lost many of you with all these theories, but the summary of all this is that to date, no country in Africa has gone from underdeveloped to developed status thanks to external solutions. None to date. That's the essential message from this giant who left us, unfortunately, on August 12, 2008 at the age of 86.
I wrote the financial side of it. It's Achilles' heel, and it will start falling apart by and through what will appear as financial crisis. I was laughed at, and a provocative journalist asked me when, but within 10 years, we were in 2002, it happened in 2008. And if it were not the subprime, it would have been something else. That is the accident. So I'll stop at that. Thank you.
My African cliché of the day is a question. Where do you see Amin's legacy today? It's difficult to answer such question when our continental sport is to keep juggling between West and East, France, UK, USA, China, India, with our feet and fists tied. Quite the opposite of Professor Amin's hard work to place the cursor of our development within the very heart of African countries. How many times do you think Samir Amin turns in his grave when he sees Senegalese people buying groceries from French-owned brands such as Auchan and Carrefour, buying fuel at Total gas station, buying phone plans from Orange, and reach their homes from work paying the road toll to Senac, all French companies and non-established in Senegal? I am not sure what you feel, but it really makes me feel like screaming. Amin, come back, come back. And you too, come back to our next Sankofa boarding. Thank you and goodbye.